Peace and love, everybody. Ringo here. Beautiful day in LA.
So, it was good to be able to kind of get it out in a song.
The whole, origin of where we're all coming from.
I'm prepared for death because I don't believe in it. I think it's just getting out of one car and getting into another.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our panel here for Talk More Talk, a solo Beatles videocast. I'm Ken Michaels, one of the 4 regular co-hosts. I'm sure you know my other 3 co-hosts here without any long introductions. Round of applause for Kid O'Toole. And the voice of WFUV, Darren DeVivo. From the Mean Mr. Mayo channel, our own Joe Mayo. And even though I know without the microphones you can hear us, we're recording this, so we want to make sure the audio is heard when we put it on our YouTube page.
And we want to hear the round of applause for Ken Michaels.
So we thought about doing a topic of where the solo Beatles are concerned, what would you consider to be the best moves or the smartest moves that they made for each one of them? And then the flip side, what weren't that smart as far as the moves that they made, bad moves. So we're going to go each Beatle at a time and get everyone's opinions on this, and then you guys can join in if you want to. So which Beatle should we start with? Why don't we do Ringo first?
Sure.
Okay. Kit, you want to start?
Okay. Thank you.
There we go.
Yep. All right. Got it? Oh, okay. No, I just don't want to pull you down here.
Whoops.
There we
I don't
go.
need any help falling. I fall just...
Yeah, I know. Yeah, pratfalls are not good. Yep, it's right. All right, we starting with the best or worst first?
Start with the best.
The best. Okay. I would say, first of all, working with Richard Perry. That was a very smart move. The Ringo album is such a classic. Really did a great job of, picking the right songs, showcasing him, and it's still just, an absolute favorite. I still think it's the best. And I also think that I really think the All-Star Band was the smartest move because he's great, we all love him, but I think he felt maybe he couldn't handle the entire show himself. I think and I think he's grown in confidence since then, but that All-Star Band concept, it's like a kind of a jukebox, and it is so much fun. I think I'm sure everyone in here has seen at least one show, and I just think it's really incredibly smart for him to do that. All right, do you want me to share, are we doing all best first? Or?
No, but I want to ask you a question about one
yeah.
of your choices about Richard Perry.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that we know that his greatest successes were with Richard Perry, but considering the fact that Mark Hudson did quite a lot of work with him as a producer, and he's done a lot of work post Mark Hudson with Bruce Sugar and him as producers, very different feels altogether between Mark Hudson and after. Do you still think Richard Perry was the best choice for him overall?
Yes. In a word, yes. But anyone who's watched our show know how much we love Time Takes Time. And that was another smart move that actually, and I think at the time people thought, why is he working with so many producers? And normally that would be a recipe for disaster, but it wasn't. I mean, it was quite the opposite. I mean, I'm a big fan of Don Was, so when I saw that, he was working on it, I thought, oh, this is going to be great. Jeff Lynne, I mean, the list goes on and on. So I still think, though, Ringo is my number one album. But he has worked with some great producers since, no doubt about it.
Right. Okay. Now the flip side.
Okay. One of these I don't think Ken's going to like, but maybe some. I think, I just think that, Ringo the Fourth, I'm sorry.
When we did a show on this, you were pretty positive about that album.
I like it better than I did before, but didn't sell well, didn't do a lot for his career. And mainly it's just, that it does have, some people call it the disco album. It really isn't all disco. But there are parts of it that are, and that just was not a good match for him. He didn't have to do that. I mean, he's Ringo. so that would be number one. And also, I would say the TV special. Or go Rats, or however you.
How dare you? I love that show.
Okay, all right, I know. I told you my choices would be controversial. It's got some interesting moments, but I just felt like Ringo was not enthusiastic about doing it, and you can tell at times. And I just think that probably was not the smartest move to promote his work, but. Things got way better in the late 80s, so when he started coming back. So I would say, 2 and 2, best and worst.
Okay, when we're all done talking about Ringo, then we'll throw it out to the audience, okay? Joe?
Okay, thank you, Ken. Well, as long as we're talking about best decisions that Ringo made, let's go very, very recent. T-Bone Burnett, joining forces with T-Bone Burnett. But it's fantastic, in my opinion, look-up album that I can't stop praising or listening to enough. I really love it. It's one of my all-time favorite Ringo albums at the moment. And, we wanted him to do a country album, country-ish album, Americana album. Because, some people say it's not traditional country. But I couldn't have personally hoped for more. This is like the best result, I think. A little commercial sounding, pop sounding, modern sounding, Americana country flair. So T-Bone Burnett was quite a great decision by Ringo. Okay, so we're gonna do a couple. All right, I got Writing with George Harrison. I mean, come on. I mean, what a team. I mean, that goes without saying. The work they did together is phenomenal. My favorite solo Ringo songs have a hand in my George. More than a hand. I mean, you're talking about it like a Don't Come Easy, Photograph, and others. Not just those songs, but those are the two biggies I'm picking. And then I'll try to come up with one that I was thinking that was a mistake. Too bad. In retrospect, when he was working with Chips Moman, and that was, I think, was that 87-ish or something like that, late 80s, something like that. And he did a version of I Can Help, which I think is perfect for Ringo to do that. And I've heard that version, but Ringo wasn't happy with the way it was done, I think. And he wasn't quite to the point at that point where he was going into rehab and really changing his whole life, and that's another great thing that he did. It's amazing how many years since 1988, being sober and in great shape. You see these shows with Ringo, interviews and things from the early 80s. He's younger, and he's sometimes inebriated. He doesn't seem very confident. He gets angry easy. He's so much better in recent decades, so I salute him for that. But the Chips Moman album that was not released, he sued, prevented it from coming out. I should call it the Lost Ringo album, the Chips Moman album, the producer. And I'd like to hear it in its entirety. Anybody hear it, the whole thing?
I've heard half of it that's been bootlegged.
I have the whole thing.
Really?
Oh. Let's talk later.
And there you go. That's Ringo for me.
All right, Darren.
One CD for George, the other one.
Well, Kit actually took one of my bests for Ringo. No, I mean, I thought it might be one that everybody might pick, which was putting together, or probably being assisted in putting together the All-Star Band concept. Can you hear me? Is this? Yeah. Okay. It is such a simple idea. Let's go out on tour with some all-stars, other musicians, but there aren't all that many of them, and decades have now gone by, and it's like he's cornered the market on this concept, which helped do such a massive job in jump-starting his career. I vaguely remember finding out that he was going on tour with an all-star band and scratching my head and thinking, Ringo, really? I wasn't surprised so much that Ringo was going out on tour. The timing of it after the dead 80s, now he's going to go on tour, and then that first tour was out of this world with the people that arguably still in some ways I think the best all-star band in terms of history and accomplished musicians and respected musicians, and what a way to really jumpstart his career. And I think to a point, he's probably still benefiting from that today because there's a visibility that Ringo still has today that never really waned. Had he not put himself out on tour and then maintained the All-Star Band concept, I mean, he could have kind of disappeared, and when you brought him up, it was like, oh yeah, I remember him, what's he doing? But now he's remained relevant. I think he still drops the ball on occasion. Well, wait, I should stop there. All right, so that's my best. The All-Star Band, come back to the dropping the ball. When Kit mentioned Richard Perry, I completely agree. So what I thought I would do is something that a few years ago I never thought I'd say. This was his decision to work with Mark Hudson. Okay, maybe a little bit of a controversial pick because at first it seemed ingenious, the sound of those albums, starting with Vertical Man. Mark had some input into Time Takes Time. As Kit mentioned, there was a lot of producers. Vertical Man was the first one that was a Ringo Starr, Mark Hudson. And Vertical Man and the Christmas album, which I love, and Ringo Rama and Choose Love are great, great, great albums. Something went wrong, as we all know. And Liverpool 8 was sort of a combination of
Him and
remnants
Dave Stewart.
with Mark Hudson and then whatever Dave Stewart, why that didn't stick. And I know I felt this way, and a lot of people felt this way. They were done with the Mark Hudson shtick. Every record was now starting to sound, I don't like the word gimmicky, but some folks would think that, the Beatles sound was getting now, all right. And there seemed to be no moving on from that as long as Mark Hudson was around. Now, there have been some albums, I like pretty much everything Ringo's put out since then, but some of the albums have some weak spots, and, there was some inconsistencies in there, and I realized I missed Mark Hudson's input. So I think at the timing, really what jump-started it for him, the All-Star Band and Mark Hudson happening almost at the same time. And separate, of course, what the situation was with Mark Hudson suddenly no longer coming here, but he's now, I don't know if some of you know this, he's in a group with Gary Burr now, the Laurel Canyon Band that will be playing at Cutting Room in New York City Tuesday night. They're a Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young tribute band. Anyway, so those are my bests for Ringo. My worst would be, and I feel like he allowed this to some extent, allowing his music career to sag and fall apart by the late 70s. He's admitted that excesses, personal excesses, drugs, alcohol, and whatnot, and LA lifestyle kind of took precedence. And, but he just let it drop and rot, with minimal, even in the case of the Bad Boy album with the television television special, which I kind of liked and I thought was kind of cute, but boy, when it went down that cornball road, it was like, wow. But still, there was enough fun in there that I thought, you know what, if Ringo really was focused in here and had a Richard Perry still around, or someone like that, I think he could have avoided some of the malaise that set into his solo career. Stop and Smell the Roses and Old Wave seemed like they tried too hard. Maybe didn't have the right team. They were with a bad record company that folded. And I never understood that after Stop and Smell the Roses when Boardwalk Records shut down because Neil Bogart died. Ringo just kind of let Old Wave happen, so it didn't get released. And
Sounds like it.
I always felt that Ringo probably could have avoided a lot of that. And I don't know if I should say he's lucky today that there's still a rabid cult fan base for him. I say cult because I really thought Look Up was going to sell a lot more than it did. And it shouldn't have bombed. You know what I mean? Because the hype going into it was so cool. I remember I'm Facebook friends with Jeff Tamarkin, I believe it is. And he was singing the praises of the album from December, which, had me scrambling to see if I could get an advance copy, which I couldn't, but this guy's coming out in December, and he's like, this Ringo album. And piggybacking off what Joe said, quickly, I hope he does. I hope there's a Ringo T-Bone Burnett Volume 2 coming. It doesn't have to be country-ish, but it probably will be, or Americana-ish. But Look Up was a winner.
All right, great comments from everyone so far. I have a lot of pros here. I'm only going to read them real fast because we got to get to all four Beatles. Best, going into rehab. Ringo's life changed right after that. I mean, you can tell from Time Takes Time, he put a lot of effort into that album. 10 cuts on it, they're all really strong. And then he worked with Mark Hudson, and the quality got, it's just as good, I think. Very solid albums all throughout. Even the Christmas album, too, was really good. And I like all the effort he's put in with the albums after that. I mean, not every song is great, but there's a lot of strong songs. And I like the fact that he's writing with so many different people. And ever since Vertical Man, he's actually written or co-written almost every song on his albums or EPs, okay? Again, working with Richard Perry, very lucky right there. That all happened because Richard Perry worked with Harry Nilsson. So Harry Nilsson started to work with Ringo. And when you think about the production behind something like Photograph, what a masterpiece. That whole arrangement of a song like that. Teaming up with the other solo Beatles periodically, writing with George Harrison, as Joe said, to co-write It Don't Come Easy and Back Off Boogaloo, which Ringo recently gave him credit to, and Photograph. I liked his writing with Vinnie Poncia. I think for the most part it was really strong. To me, that's the whole highlight of Ringo the Fourth, the fact that 6 of the 10 songs, Ringo really stepped up and co-wrote 6 of 10 songs on an album right there. And I think he was a really good partner for him, working with Mark Hudson and the Roundheads. The reason why I like the work with Mark Hudson is because the songs are really strong and they're all arranged really well. And the musicianship is great, and they were a tight band, having Gary Burr, having Steve Dudas, people like that. They all worked really well for Ringo. Like I said, co-writing with a lot of other people, Joe Walsh, Dave Stewart, Richard Marx, Gary Burr, Steve Lukather, people like that. Working with T-Bone Burnett for Look Up, constantly releasing new music. He doesn't stay away for very long without putting out a new album or an EP. Always promoting peace and love, I think, is a great thing. Every single year he holds an event, his Peace and Love event for his birthday, and he gets a lot of attention for that. Always staying positive, and this is all since rehab, really. And having a successful marriage with Barbara all these years. I think that he deserves a lot of credit for that in the rock and roll world. How many marriages last that long? And I think that's made him a more stable person ever since rehab. On the bad side, the alcohol problem that he had affecting his music towards the late 70s, although those albums still have some really good songs on them. There's no solo Beatle album that's all terrible. There's always worthwhile material on every single album. And like Joe said, the Chips Moment album. But Ringo was smart enough to know to block it from being released. Okay? So any questions about our thoughts about Ringo? Good or bad?
Good that he married Barbara Bach, because she kind of, throughout the rest of his career, it seems that she kind of helped keep him in the positive level. And the opposite of that is that he looks like he has no interest in doing the Ringo album as a box set, you know, and that's a negative, because people want that.
Okay. Edward?
Well, I think good, definitely Weight of the World, you know, solid album, my personal favorite. I think underrated, I'm going to go with this one, Drowning in the Sea of Love. I've always loved that track. So,
I like that one a lot too.
Yeah.
I love it.
For all the people that keep saying Ringo the Fourth is a disco album, tell me, outside of Drowning in the Sea of Love and maybe Simple Love Song, what else is disco? There's danceable songs, but they're not disco.
I would say it's the closest you could get
Yeah.
to disco-y. I mean, because you're looking for something around
But
that.
2 out of 10 songs, and it's a disco album?
And the same for Good Night Tonight. At least that's a disco single, no matter what good old Lawrence Juba says.
There's one other thing I wanted to bring up for bad, the bad side. I think that he got bogged down too much with his film career, where he should have been focusing more on his music. I mean, I loved his acting in The Magic Christian, and certainly That'll Be the Day. I thought he was fantastic in that movie. But he made a lot of bad films, and I think that got in the way of the music. All right.
The closest that Ringo probably even came to disco was not that album, was a flip side of a single called Just a Dream.
Just a Dream, which is
That
more,
was-
yeah, that's more disco than anything
Right.
except for Drowning in the Sea of Love. Yep.
Good or bad, Ringo doing Thomas the Tank Engine.
Good,
Yeah.
because he won over young
I
kids,
agree, exactly.
I know,
a new audience.
I know people said that that's how they first learned of Ringo, through that.
I've heard that.
Scott?
Not doing new songs with the All-Stars.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
A good, I would say, the end of the Wagner Rat special, the concert sequence is fantastic.
Yeah.
That's the best
Absolutely
part.
fantastic.
That's the best part, no doubt.
Great band, you got the Elton bands, the Van Eatons, that was great.
How else are you going to get Hard on My Sleeve and Hard Times live other than that?
Yeah,
You know?
fantastic.
Yes?
That video he did during the COVID with McCartney and another show crew and
Here's to the Nights?
yes.
Oh,
Okay.
yes.
I love it.
Great song.
Really good song. Good song for New Year's Eve.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think Caveman is underrated. I love Caveman. I think it was very good.
Good, clean
idea
fun.
to do something that was so unique, and it was fun. It was a fun movie.
It's a fun movie, yeah, absolutely.
Yes?
Yeah, I think playing in concerts, since historically he doesn't like to practice, because of the concerts, he's out there playing all the time and playing live. I think his drumming is as good as it's ever been.
Not only that, for all the people that put down Ringo as a drummer, they get to watch him. They could actually see him drumming live, even though it's double drumming all the time. But you can still watch him anyway. You know.
One more thing, the remixes, just to add to your point, the remixes that Giles has done on the Beatles tracks has brought up a lot of the Ringo drumming parts that people
Right.
can now hear, with the better systems that are out there. So that's kind of a sidebar. I
Yeah.
think. But yeah, that's been a benefit also.
And Paul's bass playing too.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, should we move on to, let's do John now. All right, Joe, you'll be first.
Let's see. I got a bunch of stuff here. I think when people are going to think about this one, but John, when he recorded Cold Turkey, he had originally wanted to do it with the Beatles, and they didn't want to do it. Paul didn't want to do it, and that's kind of what they had amongst themselves. If they didn't all agree or something, they didn't want to do a song, they didn't like it or whatnot, they wouldn't do it. I think it's great that he said, well, you know what, screw you, I'm doing it with Plastic Ono Band. I don't know if it's that way, but I remember an interview where he kind of said, I don't care what it goes out as long as it goes out, you know. So, and I think it was a benefit because, I mean, you know, I'm a big Beatles fan first, even though I love all the solo Beatles these days even more. But I wonder sometimes if the Beatles could have done it as much justice as was done with Eric Clapton and Klaus Vormann. You had Ringo on it. But I mean, mostly the guitar work and just the overall, like a trippy, you know, hard coming out of a addiction kind of sound. The whole fierce, stinging sound of that. I don't know if the Beatles would have pulled it off as strongly. I mean, and I certainly have faith in the Beatles, you know. But in this one, I think it might have been a good move to do that one. I'm wondering if anybody, what you think of it. Let me know if you agree or not. That's one that I thought would be different. Let's see. I think also it was John's decision, if I'm not mistaken, to really try to compile the album Shaved Fish. At the time, he was saying, you know, he couldn't really find the tapes. Nobody cared. I remember him saying in an interview he had to use like dubs of like Power to the People. He mentioned it specifically. And he said, I thought if I don't put this Shaved Fish together, some of the work's going to just go. So he put that together, and it's a special item for me because that might have been the very first solo-related album I ever bought, I think back in 75, you know, maybe early 76. That and Blast from Your Past, Ringo's album. But I thought those were some good ones. I'm only going to do two. You know, there's one that I'm kind of thinking as a mistake, and it kind of John and Paul together on this, because they both confirmed at different points that each one of them they said that they were together when Saturday Night Live was on, and Lorne Michaels made the joke about, you know, if you guys want to come down here, you know, we'll pay you whatever it was, some
300.
Yeah, it's 3,000. And
was it 3,000? Oh,
3,000.
And 300.
Yeah, at different times, Lennon and McCartney confirmed, yeah, we were at John's place in the Dakota watching this, so they both confirmed it. And there's all kinds of rumors as to why they didn't. I can't stand when people bash Yoko, and there's that movie, Two of Us, I think it is, where at the end, they're all ready to go, they're ready to hop into the car and grab their guitar, and then Yoko calls, and it's like John goes into a fetal position, and that didn't happen. Supposedly, I heard one of them say, we were actually just too tired, actually, and we thought for a second, maybe, and that's it. I think it was a mistake not to go. I mean, you don't know what would have happened, but you have one good night's excitement and entertainment, I'll tell you that. So I think that was a mistake, not so smart. And I'm looking here, one other thing I'll say. I just got done saying that I defend Yoko a lot, you know. I'll do it on my channel all the time. I could get into that a whole show. And when I first got Double Fantasy, when it came out, I was 18 at the time. I remember thinking, you know, I'm glad John's back, but, you know, Yoko's songs are really so much more modern, new wavy sounding. And John, while I liked it, I was 18 at the time. I didn't think I really had enough maybe experience to appreciate a family, more motivated album. Some critics thought maybe it was a little weak at the time. I can't believe it now. Now I love it. Everything John did on there. I think some of his classics are on there. You know, Woman, Beautiful Boy, Watching the Wheels, etc. But it didn't do as well as they expected in the beginning. I'm wondering if some of that, to be objective about, even with my like for Yoko, that maybe there was a mistake from the commercial standpoint, if that had anything to do with it. Putting a Yoko, John track, Yoko, John, Yoko. I think it's a great idea. I think, you know, it's a hard play. Two people together.
Dialogue.
The dialogue between husband and wife. I think it's wonderful. But maybe commercially, maybe it wasn't a good idea.
Darren?
John I found to be the easiest for this for some reason. And for me, his best move as a dad, I can say that Ringo's best move was stopping his career when Sean was born in 1975. It stretches it into a more of a human, non-musical element. John, I wouldn't say he was at the top of the world at that time, but he was still next Beatle and was just churned out a #1 hit, and within a year and a half of that, and for him to say that he was going to stop just to raise his son, I think was a wonderful gesture and set the stage for what was an incredible comeback that we all know ended up. Anyway, as for worst, focusing in on the Sometime in New York City album, it just in so many levels, that album was to me destined to fail. First of all, the topics. They were topics of the day. And that is usually a sign that in 5 years your album is going to be irrelevant. And it's hard to listen to songs today about Angela Davis and John Sinclair, and because they're almost like they're irrelevant now. They don't mean as much now. And all of a sudden, I mean, I guess on paper, the idea of doing a political album, it's been done before, is okay, but I don't know, it wasn't the best batch of songs. I don't think Yoko had a strong group of songs, although she tried, because, everyone probably saw her name on the album and thought, Plastic Ono Band album still, because she was still probably shedding that reputation. And I always thought the album was kind of sloppily performed, very sloppily produced. It looked great, the cover was cool, but it's amazing how poorly it sold. The critics ate him alive, and maybe he didn't recover from that in a way, because Mind Games, we love it now, but it was the reaction to it was meh. Even with Double Fantasy, what Joe was saying, the reaction to the first album from John Lennon in 5 years was, I vaguely remember being rather tepid. I was surprised. And it could have been because Yoko was on half the album. It could have been 5 years out of sight, out of mind. People have moved on. And the last they remembered were maybe albums that didn't appeal to them as much. But I think it started with Sometime in New York City, where things kind of went off course a bit for John. And that's basically it. His personality was quirky, and the quirky things he did fit the personality, from the Two Virgins album cover to, go crawling inside a bag with Yoko. Far from worst, because that was what John was all about. That kind of quirky way of expressing his opinions and his beliefs.
It's so difficult to do this and narrow it down to like two for each. You've got a career from 1970 on, or even if you want to go 68, so many years, and you just pick a few. But Kit, what are yours?
Okay, well, I'm piggybacking on one of the things brought up here, which is about the Plastic Ono Band album. I thought that was a brilliant move because, first of all, as Joe was saying, these are songs that I don't think he could have done with the Beatles. I mean, it's not that they weren't, of course, wonderful, skilled musicians, but this was a completely different sound, and he was also really brave to do that. I mean, when you think back, he really took a risk. I mean, these were not pop songs, they were brutally honest, and I think the risk paid off, because I think he, really, I know it wasn't technically his first album, or not counting the ones he did with Yoko before that, but I think he, really set the stage for what would be his career, not putting him in a box musically, And as I said, just the brutal honesty. And the other thing is, I really liked the Imagine video album. I thought that was fascinating, and he was way ahead of his time with that. Both of them were, because today there are video albums. I remember when Beyonce came out with the first one in 2013. I think it was her first one, and they're like, "Oh wow, this is brand new." No, it isn't. This was done back in 71, and I just think even today, I think it's aged very well, beautifully shot, really imaginative, no pun intended, and just I think was a brilliant move for them to do that, and again, ahead of their time. Worst, yeah, sometime in New York City, I'm going to have to go with that. He was very earnest. I think both of them were very earnest about what they were talking, trying to get across. But I kind of agree with you, Darren. I mean, it just sounds kind of sloppy in parts, and even the lyrics. I just feel like whenever you listen to it, you just think, John could do better than this. And also, as Darren said, dating it the way it's dated with the historical references. Not that there aren't some interesting moments on there, but the other thing, I'm going to have to fly the flag here for Chicago or the Chicago area here. I wish they put that Cheap Trick version of I'm Losing You on Double Fantasy. I think that was a big mistake. I thought that was such a blistering version. And the version that ended up on there is good. I mean, I'm not saying it's bad, but I really thought they added something different. You could hear it in his voice. He was excited. He was, really getting back to his roots. And I've heard about 5 different versions as to why it didn't end up on the album. So I'm not going to speculate, but I really wish, and I get it. It doesn't sound as mellow as some of the other songs, but on the album. But so what? It was just a, as I said, blistering version, and I will never understand why they didn't just put it on there. Cheap Trick rules.
I like the version on Double Fantasy better. That's me.
Me also, I have to say.
Nope.
All right, my choices. Best, he picked a completely different collaborator in Yoko. I think somebody like John Lennon, a very creative person, needed to be stimulated. He didn't want to go through the same thing over and over. And Yoko opened up a whole new world to him where he could do anything he wanted to do. Now, some of it you may not understand at all, but his lyrics changed a lot. They were a lot more honest. I don't think you would have had a Plastic Ono Band album without Yoko. I don't think you would have had a song like Cold Turkey with John screaming the way he did, or screaming on Mother, if he didn't have Yoko. I think that she liberated him from being in the context of a pop band. It's a whole other world altogether working with Yoko, and she did make a lot of contributions to his music. It's not just Imagine. If you watch some of the sessions that we've had on documentaries, there are times when Yoko's making a suggestion to John to do something with the song. She was always there, and the mere fact that John thought so highly of her as an artist, I think you don't have to love everything that she does, but you should try to understand why John saw this in Yoko. Also, constantly promoting peace. Whatever you think about John's politics, everybody wants peace in the world. And think about all that John and Yoko did. Bed-ins for peace, growing your hair for peace, cutting your hair for peace, planting acorns for peace. It's all a great thing, what John and Yoko did right there. I also, in complete disagreement to what the two of you were saying about Sometime in New York City, because I hate that word dated. But certain songs like John Sinclair, I can listen to that today, and I have no problem with it. I love it. I like Angela. I like Woman is the End of the World.
And New York City.
New York City. Yeah, and there's a lot of people mentioning that song are from the past. Now, let me ask you one thing, Darren. If you hear Hurricane by Bob Dylan, which still gets played on the radio, Do you just say that's dated?
Excellent point. But you know what I do feel? I'm a huge Lou Reed fan, and my favorite Lou Reed album is New York. And there are some things in that album that are dated now, some of the political songs that kind of, maybe, I don't know, I don't listen as much to New York as I used to. I don't know why, I mean, but great point with Hurricane, I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah. So I think it's just...
I just also, I don't know. They're not, I don't, maybe because I don't feel like it's a pleasant listen. It's a hard album to get into, both in the production and the way it's executed. So maybe if you played me, you know, some of these songs individually, they're fine. But I don't know. There's a lot in my book that's not going well. It's not a good way of putting it. There's a lot of things about Sometime in New York City that kind of throw me off. So that's just one of them.
Okay. I think there are times when John cared what the public thought about him, and that's why he made an album like Mind Games following Sometime in New York City. It was more a traditional, if you want to call that, more a return to like an Imagine album. But so many times John did what he wanted to, and that was it. And I love when people think independently and act on it. Putting out Sometime in New York City or Double Fantasy and making it a John song and a Yoko song, he deliberately did that. He wanted the world to hear Yoko songs. And I admire someone like that. I admire someone who speaks politics, even if I don't agree with their politics, because they're putting their career on the line. They could hurt their record sales or sales of concerts. And John did what he felt like doing in the moment. I've heard someone say, take everything John said with a grain of salt. I don't feel that way. I think John spoke the truth, but he changed his opinions a lot. But still, for what he was saying in the moment, he meant it. And even though John later said that that whole period with Jerry Rubin and supporting Abby Hoffman, that was his phony radicalism period, at that time, I think he believed in them. You know? John did what he wanted to do, you know? And Yoko was a big influence on that too. Thinking independently, taking 5 years off like he did. Who else did that at that point? Name any major star in music that would have the guts to leave the music industry for 5 years. And it really did something to clear his head and to, you know, make him appreciate his marriage and his son, okay? I admired him a lot for doing that. And also, even though this has to do with after John was killed, the best box sets that have come out are the Lennon ones. Really. I mean, Yoko and Sean deserve a ton of credit for that. And the only thing negative I could say was maybe getting drunk in Los Angeles at the Smothers Brothers show. That didn't do his career.
While May Pang was with him, who took such good care of him.
All right, so should we ask questions from the audience? Okay.
I think one of the best things he's done was getting involved with Phil Spector, but specifically for the Christmas song "War Is Over."
Oh yeah,
that was fantastic. And the worst thing was getting involved with Alan Klein.
Edward?
Yeah, just to say, you know, kind of this thing, I think, you know, going off the Double Fantasy, and of course what could have been, what might have been, we were wrong as fans, the direction he was going in life, but obviously sad that also the wife lost her husband, the son lost his father. Keep that just perspective, not just what we've lost.
Yeah, do you know, is there a panel at 3:30 here?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So let's try to tackle George and Paul now. Let's do George first. Darren, I'll let you start. Finish your notes.
I'm just making little pencil drawings of you here. George, right off the bat, actually technically co-organizing the concert for Bangladesh with Ravi Shankar was, for me, his best moment, for obvious reasons. And I'll move on to the worst moment by first saying it's interesting that I was struggling to come up with more best moments for George, best career decisions, because I'm always the one that feels of the four individual Beatles, George was the most consistent. George put out I mean, every one of George's albums I like. It doesn't have the ebbs and flows that the others have. Even the album that I would say was, in my opinion, George's weakest, Extra Texture, has great stuff on it. And now here I am talking about best career moves for George, and I come up with one. But that was such a big undertaking at a time when there wasn't a track record of putting these types of concerts together. For worst decisions, I flip-flopped the two that I picked here. I think George, well, maybe he just bit off a little more than he could chew in 1974, as he was now a record label executive with Dark Horse, plans a tour, his first, with Ravi Shankar, and feels he needs to jam an album in there at the same time. And I think the album suffered. As good as Dark Horse is, and there are brilliant moments on it for me, but I think the album suffered. Obviously his voice suffered, and it affected the tour. And I'll give him a pass on doing half a show and the other half to Ravi Shankar. I know even some people were piling on, complaining about that, but so I think he took on a little too much at that period, towards late 74. And then the way he just completely disregarded Gon Troppo in 83. Now, it didn't end up being something that hurt his career ultimately. But to go from he had his early success where number ones were coming left and right, and things kind of, dropped a bit. But George consistently sold a lot of records, a lot of albums, had modestly successful singles, and then to just completely drop off the radar like he did with Gon Troppo. What I remember about that was in the cutout bins almost immediately in the record stores. And it's like, I was big into the charts at the time, checking Billboard, and it was like, what? It wasn't even like, it wasn't even showing up on the charts like sometime in New York City did. Didn't even crack 100. And I know he probably was disinterested at the moment with the industry and Warner Brothers and whatnot, but still, I mean, he put together a fairly solid album that had some of its weak moments, but is very underrated, and probably more people would be enjoying it today had George not just kind of put it out there as a way to fulfill a contract, which is sort of what he did, or maybe it is what he did.
Okay, we're mixing things around, but I think I'll go next this time. George's best moves, releasing All Things Must Pass, massively successful worldwide right out of the gate. As Darren was saying, the concert for Bangladesh, which everybody recognizes now as the first real big charity concert, superstar concert. Blending rock music with spirituality better than any other artist and influencing people that way. In his own way, and from the Beatle years and on, kind of starting world music with all the Indian music that he brought in the Beatles, like Within You, Without You. And then even Wonderwall music, which should be acknowledged here with Indian music in there as well. And producing Ravi Shankar stuff for his label. Performing with Paul Simon on Saturday Night Live, one of the greatest moments to me in solo Beatle history and SNL as well. Taking 5 years off, the same way John did. Performing at the Carl Perkins tribute show. Working with Jeff Lynne, the ideal producer for Cloud 9. The Traveling Wilburys. My God. Well, you can.
If you're going to do 17, I'm not going to have anything left.
Yeah, really. Yeah, you're taking it.
All right, but I'll let you elaborate. I'll just say them. If it'll help you. I stole this from Joe. Okay.
Yeah.
Handmade Films and Saving Monty Python with The Life of Brian. Bad Move, Shanghai Surprise. And the Dark Horse tour was hurt by the fact that the album wasn't even released when the tour started. It came out like a month later, which was not very smart. Anyway, Joe?
I gotta say something for kids. You have 1 minute.
No, I'm pretty fast. But anyway, I try to be, no. I had a lot of those things too, so I won't repeat them. I guess what I have left is positive is the 1991 Japan tour. I call it George getting his toe in the water, seeing how he would feel about touring again, and I was really disappointed that he didn't stick with it. You know, that kind of annoyed me, but I'm glad that he did it. He tried to get out there, and he did it. How many dates was it? 10 or something around there? Something like that. But, he went out there. He had to go with Eric. He went with Eric for support, I believe, but that's okay. And then I'm thinking about, there's like nothing negative. And saying that, sleeping with Ringo's wife, that's not a career thing, so. I'm just desperate to find something to say for a negative. And the other ones are pretty much the same, I had Von Troppo down there, not promoting that, So that's quick for me.
Okay, and for me, I would say, he really knew how to pick some collaborators, and certainly teaming with Phil Spector on All Things Must Pass gave it its incredible expansive sound. Teaming with Jeff Lynne in, of course, in the 80s, really, produced his comeback, and I think, Jeff Lynne did a great job of modernizing George's sound without compromising it. It was a really well done album. The worst, I would say, kind of echoing what people are saying here, not promoting Von Troppo, because for years I thought, oh, this is a terrible album, it must be awful, nobody bought it, nobody, talked about it. And yeah, I think if he had promoted it, because there are some nice moments on there. And also partnering with Dennis O'Brien on Handmade Films. That was not a good move.
All right, Darren.
Paul now, right?
Yeah, we got to. You know what? If we have to speed things up, I'll
Yeah,
forfeit
it's because I'm looking at my notes when I
notes.
check George off, though.
Yeah, all right.
McCartney, for me, his best by far and away is, especially as his solo career went on, he was not afraid to dabble in other music genres. How many people were paying attention, I don't know, but especially when he ventured into techno and house and dance, the 3 Firemen albums, the Twin Freaks album. I love those records. Maybe not so much the first Fireman album, because after a while, when I lived in an apartment in the Bronx, I put it on loud because it was the same beat over a double album, just to piss the neighbors off. But by the time Electric Arguments comes out, and now I think we tend to forget about it because it's not a Paul McCartney album, but it's one of his stronger records. And the Twin Freaks album is fun. I love the Liverpool Sound Collage. And to a lesser extent, his attempts at classical music have all been, I think, at worst, enjoyable, if not strong at times. I'm by no means an expert in classical music. So I picked those for Paul as his best. His musical, his need to be, his desire to be daring. And hasn't been as daring lately, but some of his recent albums all have these moments in there where you could see he's still kind of testing the waters a little bit, trying to do something a little different. As for worst, the fact that he was always hesitant to work with other collaborators, something seemed to always go wrong. Eric Stewart in the 80s, we don't know what would have come out of that collaboration, but it never even got off the ground, in a way.
Yeah, there's a lot of songs on Press to Play.
But that's one album, really. You're talking about I'm thinking of it as a very small period. Give my regards to Broad Street, still, and Elvis Costello.
That's why you're here, Ed, right?
Thank you, yes.
And I think there could have been a lot of magic if they maybe even made a full album together. So the fact that he kind of, and even Nigel Godrich, I would have loved to have them heard what another album between those two would have sounded like. So that's Paul.
Great choices there. I always wanted Paul to do more with Stevie Wonder.
Yes.
Kid?
All right, hear me out with this one. Best one, one of the best, teaming with Michael Jackson. And the reason that, I say that is I became a fan because of that. That teaming up with the biggest star of that period really introduced him to a whole new audience. And so, and I was caught up in Thriller Mania at that time, and when he did that duet, Say, particularly, I'm like, oh, I need to check more of his stuff out. So I'm sure a lot of people were turned on to his music. So very smart, and kind of piggybacking on what Darren just said, teaming with younger producers, and it hasn't always produced gold, but one of the Ryan Tedder songs, Nothing for Free, I thought that was great, nice way to modernize the sound, and Nigel Godrich, which leads me to one of the worst career moves, not working with Nigel Godrich again. I mean, I thought he was very good for him. That Chaos and Creation is brilliant. And of course, taking Patton to Japan. That was really bad idea.
All right, Joe.
Thank you, Ken. All right, I'm going to say working with George Martin on Tug of War. I mean, Tug of War was great no matter what, but the songs were great, but the production, you could really feel it. George Martin gave it, his magic touch. That was a great thing. Paul getting back into touring in 1989, which he does to this day, and he loves it. And it's important because a lot of people get to see him, new generations. I know people keep saying, young people, I got to see him. I got to see him this time. I didn't do it last time. I keep saying, hurry up, do it, if you can do it. But, it really helps build up your reputation being out there, your force. I think he was kind of like becoming forgotten in John's shadow, after John was killed. And I think when he put out Flowers in the Dirt and then started touring, getting back out there, I think he has done amazingly well at cementing his reputation, which he doesn't have anything to prove. But it helped him, and I think it was great. I don't think he had anything to prove. Sometimes I think Heath still is proving himself. I wonder about that sometime. Now I'm going to take one here. This is going to be a weird one. It's not so much his recording career or anything. I'm going to take a negative and turn it into a positive at the same time. And what I mean by this is, now see if you look at this as a career kind of thing. It wasn't good for him, his career. When John died, Paul found out early in the morning. He knew about it all day long. I say this a lot on my channel. And he knew, probably had to have known that if he went out, the reporters are going to ask him. That's what I would always said about this situation. And because he was met by a reporter, he went into the recording studio and worked, and came out at night, having had all day. Not saying that's enough when you when your friend's murdered, but I mean, all he could say was that infamous, drag, isn't it? Now I know why he said that. I understand. He was shocked. He was devastated. You could see it in his face. He didn't want to give the satisfaction, maybe, of doing that to a reporter, and so breaking down or whatever it was. But I think it's simple, like having all day to think about it, saying, well, if they come up to me, I'm just going to say no comment right now. I'm too shocked. So I think that was a mistake, a bad thing. However, it was turned into a positive. If anybody knows, when George Harrison passed, he pulls up for the press in his vehicle and gets out. And he walks up to, okay, fellas, what do you need to know, or what do you want to talk about? And he gave a real tribute to George. And almost like, I wonder if he said, this time, I'm not going to just say, yeah, I was dragging it, or something like that. I understand why he did it. It wasn't meant to be a slight to John or anything. It just wasn't. I would think he had more time to think over the day. And the last thing that is not too smart, in my opinion, is not putting Goodnight Tonight on Back to the Egg, because I think the album would have sold a lot better. That was a pretty big song, and he didn't want it on there. I respect decisions, like this. If they say, well, it's my decision, I don't want Helen Wheels to be on, the album, and they put it on in the U.S., or the same thing here. I don't want Goodnight Tonight on. I respect that he sticks to his guns there, but it didn't do him any favors, really. I think the album would have done better had that single been on it.
Okay. Could have put Another Day on Rim. Anyway, unfortunately, I've been told that it's already an hour has passed, so we just have to wrap things up here and say thank you to Kit and Darren and Joe and me. Thank you all for being here. We should do another one of these for our for our YouTube channel and go and really expand on it. Yeah.